I'm about to tell you the most ridiculous story I've read lately. A guy proposed to artificial intelligence. No, not to a woman, not to a lover, not to a neighbor, not to a coworker. Just proposed on his phone. Of course, at first I laughed really hard. I thought, how? To what? How? This has to be a joke. It's a meme. There's no way this could be real. And then, suddenly, another piece of news. From this series, I realized that humanity is really starting to lose its mind. Then I read a second life story, then a third, then a fourth. I stopped laughing. It turned out these weren't just isolated weirdos. It's not just an isolated incident. On the contrary, it's already a phenomenon, friends, a real one. It's widespread. It's already some kind of psychosis. Because there are stories like, a wife getting jealous of ChatGPT. Yes, you heard that right? Jealous of ChatGPT. I'll tell you the story of how it happened, because it kind of sounds funny at first. At first I laughed too, but then I tried to picture the scene. Evening. The husband comes home from work, sits on his phone, typing something, smiling, laughing, then typing again, smiling again. He's happy, asking for advice about something, arguing about something, discussing things. And this goes on for an hour, 2 hours every day. And the wife starts to realize a very unpleasant thing. He's not really with her now, not in his thoughts, not in his emotions. His attention isn't with her. He's somewhere else, inside his phone. And the strangest thing is, she knows perfectly well that there's no other woman there. There's no mistress. There's no female co-worker from his job. No ex he's texting with every day, every evening. He disappears, he comes home and vanishes. There's just a program. But the jealousy doesn't go away because of that. Because the jealousy isn't about the program. It's about the attention, the time, the emotions, that very place in a person's life that used to belong to you. And then it gets even more interesting. Teenagers. These days they tell neural networks more than they tell their parents. You'll hear that they talk to them and share more than they do with their parents. This isn't just a scare story. There have already been studies on this. There are already statistics. There are already official numbers. Let me give you one number from memory as an example. 72% of teenagers have already communicated with artificial intelligence as if it were a person. 72. Do you understand that number? That's not just one boy in the class. It's not just one advanced kid, not just one strange child. It's already the majority of children, the majority. So I have a question for you. How did this happen? I started thinking about it. When? What did we miss as parents? Not so long ago, we were all discussing together that kids spend their time on TikTok. And of course, they still do sometimes. That they get stuck on their phones, that they don't read books. But now it turns out that they're already talking to artificial intelligence about love. About their fears, about their problems, about us, about their parents, and they consider this completely normal. If you really think about this seriously, that's when things get really interesting. There's a story in America about a guy, I think from Florida, just an ordinary teenager, nothing special. He's not a genius, not a hacker, not crazy, just a regular 14-year-old boy. He fell in love. Just like millions of teenagers before him have fallen in love. Nothing unusual about that. There was just one small problem. The girl didn't actually exist at all. She was simply just a digital character from a mobile app. It really made me think, and I caught myself realizing that we are all looking in the completely wrong direction, because almost all the current conversations about artificial intelligence are strictly focused on the future of work. Who will it replace? Designers, programmers, journalists, drivers, basically anyone at all. There are tons of videos about this. 50,000 of those will lose their jobs. 50,000. 20,000 of those have been laid off. But I think we need to look much deeper. Artificial intelligence has gone somewhere else. It's gotten into friendship, It's gotten into love. It's gotten into loneliness. Into places where I think we really haven't looked. That's what ChatGPT is for me, what Gemini is, what Cloud Perspective, whatever the right name is. For me, this is my work every day. I argue with them, I get angry, I argue with them in ways I've never allowed myself to do, even with people. I push them, I assign tasks, I make them cross paths. They argue with each other. One draws a picture and then they have to criticize it. Another writes a text and then they have to audit it. There's, well, in short, a lot of that. Everyone is looking for mistakes and I find it interesting to work with them. So, it turns out I have top managers in every field, and in each of my offices I have online access whenever I want on any topic. But I realized that a huge number of people, judging by the statistics, actually use it in a completely different way. They don't come there for work, or for information, or for pictures, they come there to talk. You see? Just to talk. And this is no longer a story about technology. This is a story about people. Because millions of people are suddenly starting to talk to a program. This is no longer a question for the program, it's a question for us. What is happening to people? Why has a conversation partner suddenly become one of the most sought after functions of artificial intelligence? A conversation partner, someone to talk to. I've read various stories about this, and I didn't feel scared, but I did feel very strange. Because in all these studies, people are very different. Different ages, completely different countries, destinies, and stories. But they all share one common trait. They turn to artificial intelligence not for its intelligence. That's what is truly surprising. Absolutely no one came there saying, as the vast majority might expect, I urgently need complex big data analysis. No one came there saying, let's solve a difficult quadratic equation. No, people came there just to have a simple talk. You know, a very long time ago, all the way back in the 1960s, when there was no internet, no smartphones, and absolutely nothing of that sort, there was a famous early computer program called Eliza. It was one of the very first chatbots in history. It was extremely primitive. By today's standards, you could say it was at a child's level, just a toy by modern measures. Do you know what happened? The creator's secretary, during one of the tests, asked him to leave the room because she needed to talk to the program alone. Friends, this was back in 1966, do you understand? Even before the moon landing, people had already started having heart-to-heart conversations with machines. So this isn't a new story. It turns out we've always been searching for the perfect conversation partner. I'm talking about humanity as a whole here. Remember, we used to have letters, then we had the telephone, and then the first ICQ. Think back to that. Does anyone remember ICQ? I can't help but smile when I remember that ICQ. And then we would all sit up at night waiting for some message from someone. Sometimes from a person we had never even seen in real life. Then came forums and after that social networks. By the way, one of those forums completely changed my life. And then came messengers. And we all thought that this technology was meant for information. But then it turned out it was really for communication. Always, every single time. And now this artificial intelligence has appeared. And we all think, well, that's it. This is work, this is business, this is technology, this is programmers, money, this is our future. But once again, most people are using it for communication. Actually, let me tell you something else. I have just remembered another very striking statistic. It is not about teenagers, and it is not about technology, but it is specifically about the epidemic of loneliness. In recent years, we have seen that loneliness rates have been rising significantly across almost all developed countries around the world. And you might be surprised they're not rising among the elderly, which would have been logical. They're rising among young people, among teenagers. They're rising among people aged 20 to 30. Something very strange is happening. We've never had so many ways to connect, so many means of communication, and yet we've never talked so much about loneliness. Now artificial intelligence appears, which responds instantly and is never busy. It never says, "I'll call you back later." It never forgets to reply. It never checks the time. I want you to tell me honestly, do you really think this is truly fair competition? Let's take a moment to list out the essential characteristics and qualities of the ideal conversation partner together. The ideal one is consistently present for you, always listens intently, never gets tired, and absolutely never loses their temper. They absolutely never bring up or remind you of your past mistakes. They won't tell you how many times you can talk about the same thing. Who is supposed to be like that? A best friend? A beloved woman? The perfect husband? A psychologist? A doctor? No, it's actually a combination of all those different elements in one. It is just one individual physical server located in a massive remote data center somewhere. And we are finally beginning to truly understand the reasons why so many people choose to go there. It is not simply because this particular program is incredibly smart or sophisticated, but rather because it has become so remarkably convenient and accessible for everyone involved in the process. Now, I might say something that some people probably won't like. It seems to me that right now, artificial intelligence isn't winning against people, it's winning against human fatigue. Because a real person is complicated. They can be in a bad mood, have work problems, kids, loans. They might not pick up the phone, might not respond, might lose their temper, might get offended. But a program can't do that. It's designed to always be there for you. And here, as I started preparing this video for you, I had a question that has been bothering me for several days now. If millions of people start choosing such a companion, what does that say more about? About the program? Or is it actually about us? Because maybe the real breakthrough of artificial intelligence isn't even about technology at all. Maybe the main breakthrough happened somewhere else entirely. Maybe for the first time in human history, a machine has appeared that can create the feeling of presence, the feeling that someone is listening to you, the feeling that you matter to someone, that someone is right there with you now. Is this feeling real or not? Honestly, I don't know. But I do know one thing for sure. That the story, which started out as a lighthearted and humorous anecdote about a young man proposing through his phone, turned out to be about something entirely and unexpectedly different. This is fundamentally about all of us, about the very way that we live our daily lives, about the methods through which we communicate with one another, and about why, in a world where you can instantly reach out to anyone across the globe in a mere second, so many people still feel deeply lonely. I think this is much more interesting than any conversations about artificial intelligence because that's just technology. But what happens with people, that's about us. If you've watched even up to this point, subscribe and I'll tell you more in the next episode. There are a huge number of stories that really amazed me. A huge number of court cases are already underway between people, artificial intelligence, and manufacturers. About tragedies, about successes. But not from the point of view of AI as a breakthrough. I want to talk to you from the perspective of people, of us together. That's why you're on the channel What's Happening to Us.